you very much. And Bernard, if you have to rush out and catch that plane, I won't feel a bit bad. I know you're not walking out on me, so I hate you to miss your plane. Friends, I think, and I know that I'm talking to a group of people who are very politically savvy, who know a lot about Timor to start with. And so therefore, in the 20 minutes that I have, I want to do something just perhaps a bit differently, and you can join all the dots. And I'm enormously grateful to hear Bernard, what he was saying today. I wish I'd had writing it down. I was entranced. I'll get back onto you. Friends, I'm holding in my hand a myth. I got it off the internet from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Anybody can get it, and it's about the Timor Sea. It is a myth. Now, I love myths. I used to love them when I was at school, you know, the Greek and Roman myths, and then went on to the other myths, the Indian myths, etc. And they were great stories because the goodies were the goodies and the baddies were the baddies, and the baddies got their just desserts and everybody lived happily ever after. But then I started to read René Girard, not the footballer, the philosopher. René Girard, and what I'm going to say is coming there from him, and because it's brief, I'm a bit worried it'll be a bit simplistic, and I don't want to in any way suggest that Girard's work is in any way simplistic. He died about 18 months ago at 92, a wonderful man, a wonderful thinker of our times. And reading his work, I've got a very different view of myth altogether. In Girard's view, a myth is a disguised account of a scapegoating event. So it's really a story of a group and the group's victim. Girard states that the basis of all religions and all cultures is the victim. A victim scapegoated in order to address some crisis which was bringing social mayhem. The victim is seen to be the cause of the problem because when something happens, somebody must be to blame. Who are we going to blame? I mean, we still do it. We look around. There's always got to be somebody to blame. The sacrifice of a victim had the effect of uniting a fearful, divided or warring groups. Scapegoating someone or some group meant that people focused their aggression onto one instead of fighting each other. Now take the tale of Oedipus. According to the myth, there was a plague in Thebes which devastated the city. Then Oedipus was expelled from Thebes because he murdered his father and married his mother. Under Girard's interpretation, that the fact that in the myth there was a pest in Thebes suggests that there is a disguised social crisis. To solve the crisis, Oedipus is selected as a scapegoat because in the story he's never presented as a scapegoat. He's presented as guilty, accused of parricide and incest, and this justifies his persecution. The act of the persecutors is disguised. They are seen as innocent, pillars of society, the saviours of the community. Their persecution of him is gilded with righteousness. Anything which might exonerate him, though, is omitted. In Girard's view, scapegoats were usually someone different, a foreigner perhaps, or a disabled person, someone weak, or if things were really hot, the king could be chosen and the whole mob of the people turn against the king as the scapegoat. Girard says a myth should be read as a chronicle written by a community that chose a scapegoat, blamed that person of crimes and punished them or him or her. The myth omits anything that would exonerate the victim. It slides over the guilt of the murderers and the unanimous cruelty of the crowd. It twists the tale to suit the prospects of the dominant powers, those with the ability to ensure that there were enough victims to maintain them and their status. Girard's investigations then took him to the Jewish and Christian scriptures, where he found something which threw his life into reverse gear. While the scriptures do contain mythic elements, they increasingly portray victims as innocent. For example, the story of Joseph in the Old Testament. the book of Job, many of the Psalms, the suffering servant in the book of Isaiah. In the text of the Gospels particularly, Jesus of Nazareth is patently innocent, and the blame for his death in the Gospel texts is put squarely on the shoulders of those to who should bear it, that is, the religious and political leaders and the crowd. So in Girard's view, that changed everything. The victim, the scapegoat, can no longer be understood as guilty. In fact, we can all see through the scapegoating process. We've had 2,000 years of practice in realising that if you have a bad day and you come home and scream at the wife or kick the cat, you really do know what's going on. No longer then can we write myths. The Nazis tried it, churches try it, governments try it, corporations still try it, but it's too transparent. We can actually see through it. Girard calls modern day attempts to write myths texts of persecution. So I put it to you that the official Australian record of its dealings with Timor Leste over all the years that Bernard has been talking about are texts of persecution. They are collections of myth-like structures which avoid placing the blame for the sacrifice of the victim, the Timorese people, where it lies, on the heads of successive governments and on a generally oblivious population. In World War II, the good of the Timorese people was subjected to the perceived greater need of Australian security. The omission in public discourse of this unique wartime event to this very day is a disgraceful example of cover-up, silence and evasion of responsibility. Do you know that that event is not even mentioned in the new history curriculum, in the school curriculum, 2013? No. It is not mentioned. In 1975, as we know, the Indonesian military invaded East Timor, the Australian government making muted noises about goodness and niceness on the sidelines, but inaction, passivity, complicity and deceit, proving that Australian security and lucrative prospects with a speedily developing Indonesia were more important than the Timorese people. Australia trained Indonesian military personnel and sold or gave military equipment to Indonesia throughout the 24 years of the occupation. We were the only nation, no we weren't, Australia gave de jure recognition of Indonesian sovereignty, and we were the first among the few who did so. Successive governments ignored, omitted and covered up facts, exonerating and supporting Indonesia's annexation of the territory. Silence and misinformation accompanied active opposition to broadcasting news of the devastating Timorese death toll. Yet, our government documents consistently claim that Australia's position was always that East Timor had the right to self-determination. That is in the documents. They maintain that that was our position, our policy, in the face of all these facts. Texts of persecution indeed. This text of persecution is labelled a fact sheet put out by the Department of Foreign Affairs in January of this year. And friends, on that table, before you go, I've got a sheet which I haven't got here, below. It's there, oh yes, here it is. Look, it's set out like that. I've put down the text of what's in here, in the myth, and I've made some comments about the omissions and the exonerations and the smoothing over and all that stuff. So the fact sheets, now they look at these omissions, which is so integral, in Girard's view, to myths. They just skidded over the things that really put the blame where it lay. So in this fact sheet for the Australian population, there's nothing about benefiting from a deal with an illegal occupier. And it's got nothing about our withdrawal from Indonesian oversight. It sort of suggests that Australia was generous. Now, we know Alexander Downer used that word quite often, generosity. And there's even a suggestion here about how fishing rights were left in the Joint Petroleum Development Area for the Timorese. I mean, why would you introduce something like fishing rights into something about petroleum? It's as though, oh, you know, let the little brown people get on with their fishing. We're giving them their fishing rights in their. Oh, honestly. Now, now I just want to go back on those 3 points. Benefiting from a deal that was done with an illegal occupier. Now, so the Timor Sea Treaty, which was signed in 2002, which resulted in the area called the JPDA, the Joint Petroleum Development Area, it was simply a renegotiation of the old Timor Gap Treaty, you know, the one with Gareth Evans and the champagne in the plane, you know, and he and Ali Alatas are toasting each other for their wonderful thing that they'd done, 50% to Indonesia and 50% to Australia. So in 2002, with the newly independent Timor Leste, our government rushes up there and renegotiates this. And the generosity, we're told, comes from the fact that the Timorese are going to have 90% of that, and we're only going to get 10%, you know? So that's, of course, it's all 100% on their side of a median line. Now, Bernard has alluded to the withdrawal from the international arbiters at that time. And I'm just very conscious that on the 20th, which is in 2 days' time, it's 15 years since Timorese independence. So we're really sort of around about the anniversary of the signing of this Timor Sea Treaty. But just 2 months before the signing, Australia withdrew from the jurisdiction of the sections of the international bodies which concern maritime boundaries. Therefore, Timor was left to deal with Australia without the benefit of international oversight. And one really wonders whether the terms of the Timor Sea Treaty would have been accepted had there been international oversight. I strongly doubt it, because anybody with half an eye would be able to see that what was being agreed to was manifestly unfair. And we can also say, if Australia's claim to 10% of that area and giving Timor 90% of that area was so secure in law, then why did we withdraw? I've already mentioned about the suggestion of our generosity, as though that we had something we would be able to give these people. And I find that often when I'm talking to groups of people, that, you know, Australians are good-hearted. You know, there's huge numbers of really good-hearted people out there who've got some idea that somehow or other we owe something to the Timorese. So they say, oh, you know, let's give them, you know, that, as if it was in our gift to give them what is theirs. And that's what we're on about here with our petition that we're talking about here, that I want every person in this room to sign, if you haven't already signed it. A petition to the House of Representatives asking them to assist the government to come to some fair agreement with the Timorese. Now, I don't know whether it's going to be connected with the compulsory conciliation. What I do know is that this is a problem that Australia has, which could be fixed tomorrow if there was the political will. It is totally within our grasp, within our competence to fix this problem. And the fact that Australia continues just to hang on, trying to wear these people down, it really makes so many people, like your good selves, really quite, I was going to say ashamed, but it's more than that. It's, well, it's angry anyway for me. Our myth, friends, our myth. Let me tell you some of the omissions, some more of them. It does not mention that Australia has received all the jobs and all the infrastructure from the JPDA. Timor got none of that, okay? So we're saying on one hand, oh, we're giving them 90% and keeping 10%, yes, plus all the jobs and infrastructure. It doesn't mention that Australia has received $2 billion in tax revenue from an area that is totally in a disputed area, Laminaria Corallina, and Timor got zilch. Actually, neither nation should have got anything. It should have been put away until this whole business about the border was decided. But we've already got that, and I guarantee we've spent it, and it's pretty well empty. Of course, it's no news to you that the allegations about spying over the CMATS Treaty is not mentioned. Another omission. It doesn't mention that the Timorese Prime Minister has, on 2 occasions that I know of, asked formally for discussions with Australia over the maritime boundary. And it was Mr Turnbull he asked, and he was refused. Nothing about that there. What a disgrace to turn down a request from a neighbouring nation over something as important as a border. So the Timorese were left with no legal avenues other than the compulsory conciliation. Okay? That's not mentioned there. In fact, the other day I received an email from a man who had received an email from another man who had said to him that Australia has now gone to international arbitration to try and fix this problem. Like he's got the whole thing totally upside down. The man who sent me his email didn't know how to respond. So that's what we're dealing with. That's that sort of ignorance. In some cases, it's culpable ignorance when people, like in Department of Foreign Affairs, etc., there's a culpable ignorance and an ignorant ignorance, and there's a lot of ignorance actually going around. That's why I think a thing as simple as a petition to the House, where you can read it it's got 3 sentences. Anybody who can read that would get some idea of it anyway. Now I'm just moving on, friends. Yes. In our myth here, our text of persecution, it doesn't mention that the first response of the Australian government to the setting up of the compulsory conciliation was to challenge the jurisdiction of the Commission. Australia put up 6 objections, and every single one of them was found to be without legs, and so the Commission went ahead. It is a sorry tale. It's a terribly sorry tale. So I'm really asking you, good friends, tonight, let's do something practical as a result of all this. We can be fair. Most Australians want to be fair. You've got friends and neighbours too who want to be fair. All they've got to do is sign this petition. Now, you don't even have to put your address nowadays. The rules of petitions have changed. It's wonderful. Congratulations to our government for making it so easy, actually. This is also going online on the Parliament website in June, and we'll let people know about that because some people like to do it online. But actually, it's really good to be able to just stick it under somebody's nose and say, here, do you want to be fair to Timor? Do that. Now, friends, one of the reasons we're doing the petition is to make a petition to the House and to try and get them to do something about it. That's the first one. We want a big petition. But a petition also has the added advantage of being an educative tool. Because if a person stands there and actually reads the term of the petition, at least something has gone through their brain about the fact that there's no median line. Okay? So it's a little bit of education. And if they take the pen and sign, it's a little commitment to truth. So, it's really worth it. And I say on the end of it, even if there's only one signature on the petition, because you're going to go home and you're going to take some petitions with you, and you can say to your friends and neighbours, here, sign this. Even if only one signs it, it's one signature, and that's one signature more than we already had. So it's awfully important that you do that. Look, I'm going to stop there, but oh yes, also, this, there probably is not enough for one each, but down there is, that's a thing. Now, that's not a myth, okay? That's the truth there. It's trying to be fair to Australia, and it's fair to Timor too. And that's what we all want to do. So, you know, take a sheet, take a petition, and thank you very much.